Welcome to First Parish, Unitarian Universalist, Canton. My name's John Donovan, and I'll be your worship associate this morning. I'm joined this morning by our minister, Reverend Dr. Clyde Grubbs, and our ministerial intern, Elizabeth Foster. This community honors diversity and joyfully welcomes all who share the values and principles of our congregation. We're very glad you chose to worship with us today. We hope you find your time with us to be very meaningful. All right, without further ado, I will hand it over to Reverend Clyde.
Good morning. Good morning. I have the most appropriate melody for flower communion. Hay fever. This little sneeze. You're forgiven. Oh, you're late. We used to say that people don't really come until the first hymn. Therefore, I moved the first hymn way back. The invocation this morning is going to be in two parts because we wrote two invocations. Flower Communion by Thomas Rhodes. We come in a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes. Some of us thrive in bunches. Some of us grow alone. Some of us are cupped inward. Some of us spread ourselves out wide. Some of us are old and dried and tougher than we appear. Some of us still in bud. Some of us grow low to the ground. Some of us stretch toward the sun. Some of us have felt like weeds. Some of us are prickly, and sometimes all of us are beautiful. And now we're going to have our other invocation. You can say, I like the first, I like the second, I like both.
Yes, just like you can choose your favorite flower this morning, you can also choose your favorite invocation. This flower communion invocation is by Elizabeth M. Strong. Enter into the communion of flowers. Enter with joyful hearts. Enter with reverent thoughts. It has taken long months beneath cold ground for these flowers to prepare their blooming. And it has taken each of us long times of growth through sorrow and joy to prepare for our living now. The blooming season is short. The flowers stay only for a brief time. We are travelers upon the earth, travelers through all to brief lifetimes.
Let us join in hymn number 396 in the gray hymnal, 396 in the gray opening hymn. I know this rose will open.
This is a round, and I've asked some of the choir members to come up and sing part 2 of the round.
So you might be wondering where this whole flower communion idea came from. So Reverend Clyde and I are going to do one of our question and answer format stories, and we'll hopefully all learn a little more about flower communion together. So when was the first flower communion?
The first flower communion was in Czechoslovakia, in Prague, in 1923. 1923. This is 2023. This is the 100th anniversary of the flower communion.
Prague? Prague? I didn't know there were Unitarian Universalists in Prague.
Well, they weren't. Until Norbert Capek created a Unitarian Universalist congregation over several years. There were 3,000 members in that congregation. So he started the Unitarian Universalist congregation because he had discovered Unitarian Universalism when he was in the United States. He said, oh, I like this. So he brought it back to Czechoslovakia. There was this little thing called World War I, little thing, that lasted. Czechoslovakia didn't exist in 1914. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was the Bohemia province of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So he had to leave Czechoslovakia, or Bohemia, because there was a war and he was opposed to the war.
And then he came to the United States? But how did he become a Unitarian?
Well, when he was a youngster in Czechoslovakia, his parents, his father was a skeptic. You know what a skeptic is? And his mother was a Catholic. And so between them, he went to church because his mother brought him to church, a Catholic church, and he was an altar boy. And he was very interested in religion, but he didn't like the priest. So he became a Baptist. And he got ordained as a Baptist in Czechoslovakia and got called just in time, 1914, when the war started. He got called to New York City to be the minister of a Baptist church in New York City.
But we still haven't explained how he became a Unitarian.
Well, he's in New York City. And he's got liberal ideas. And he's got liberal ideas that are even clashing with this newfound free religion that he had chosen, Baptist. He was even more liberal than they were. So he discovered a Unitarian church in New Jersey. If you've ever been to New York, you know New Jersey isn't bad. You just commute across the Hudson. So he got this Unitarian church, and he went there because he and Maya Chapek, he and Maya Chapek had children. And a lot of people go to church, choose a Unitarian church because they have he didn't want them to go through the Sunday school he went through, so he brought them to the Unitarian church. And over time, he decided he was a Unitarian himself. Did I answer the question?
Yes. So how did he create the flower communion?
Well, when he got back to Czechoslovakia, he founded the Liberal Religious Fellowship of Prague. Liberal Religious Fellowship of Prague. It's in Czech. The language Czech. So that's the best translation I can give you. And he kept talking to them about this new liberal religion, and he discovered that they didn't want to do ceremonies. So like the communion service that has wine and bread, they didn't want to do that. because it reminded them of their old church. So he thought that they needed a ritual that expressed their new faith, their new way of being, their new understanding, and he developed the flower communion in 1923.
And what happened after that?
They celebrated flower communion for 10 years.
Yeah, they did. Yes, but what happened to Kapek and his church?
Well, if you remember your history books, because we're all too young to remember it personally, Czechoslovakia was one of the countries that the Nazis invaded, started something called World War I. Two. It's World War II. So he was serving the Unitarian Church and doing his thing when the Nazis arrested him for basically being anti-Nazi. And he went to Dachau concentration camp, where he became a victim of what's called medical experimentation. See how long somebody can live with formaldehyde in their blood, things like that. So he died in Dachau in 1944.
So how did the flower communion get back to the United States after that?
Well, his wife, Maya Kapek, was told to get the heck out of Czechoslovakia by her husband as soon as the Nazis invaded. He decided he had to stay to be with his congregation, but he didn't want her there. Does that make sense? So she ended up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and went to the First Parish church in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And in solidarity, the First Parish church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, did a flower communion as a solidarity with the people suffering under Nazi occupation in World War II. And the First Parish continued to do it, and other Unitarian churches adopted the idea. By the end of the war, there were probably 50 churches doing it. And by the 1960s, there were probably 500 churches. When did you start doing it? All his life. See? So it's had, right now, flower communion is celebrated in almost every Unitarian Universalist church in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, that's England, Scotland, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Czechoslovakia.
Wait, I have one more question. Why do we call it a communion anyway?
Because a communion, many Unitarian churches find the word communion to be intriguing because they associate it with ceremonies that they don't celebrate. Protestant churches have bread and wine, and I think you get a wafer at Catholic churches. So that they don't want to do communion, and they call it a flower festival, flower ceremony, flower. What else? Flower.
I've only heard ceremony, I think.
Flower
mostly,
ceremony. But the word communion, and it's always been, it was since 1923, it was called flower communion because a communion is any ceremony in which an element exists that takes the place of a theological sermon. So what these flowers represent are your gifts to the congregation. You bring a gift to the congregation, and you represent it in a flower. Then at the end of the ceremony, you take a flower, and that means that which is different than the one you brought, because you have been enriched by this whole congregation together. So you are changed, and the flower is changed because you got a new flower. It's a communion, is water communion, fire
we did
communion.
chocolate communion.
Huh?
We did our chocolate communion.
We had a chocolate communion. So anything where an element represents the whole theological, whole religious meaning, that's a communion. Blueberry communion, I guess.
Thanks, Reverend Clyde. And I hope we all learned a lot about the origins of flower communion today.
So now we gather the flowers, and we've gathered some of the flowers here. Does anybody have a flower out there to gather? Yes, we got a flower back there, John. John said he would go gather all flowers that were kept. Behold the flowers. Infinite. This is from the words that Dr. Chapek used to describe the flower communion in 1923 in Prague. And these were the what's called the consecration words, or what we could call the blessing of the flowers. Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these, thy messengers of fellowship and love. May they remind us, amid diversities of knowledge and gifts, to be one in desire and affection. May they also remind us of the value of community, of doing and sharing alike. May we not let our awareness of another's talents discourage us or sully our relationship. And may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do the work of the world. Consecrated, blessed.
I'll be reading what has become a pretty traditional flower communion blessing that a lot of UU congregations use now. And it's by Amy Zucker Morgenstern. So if you like, you can join with the refrain for this blessing, which is, "May our lives bloom like the flowers." And I will gesture when it's time for us to do that. Each of us is a flower with a delicate beauty uniquely our own. We may be like sunflowers turning always towards the light. May our lives bloom like the flowers. We may be like night-blooming ceres, only displaying our fragrant petals when it is dark and we think no one can see. May our lives bloom like the flowers. We may be hothouse flowers, cautiously tended within a harsh and unfamiliar place. May our lives bloom like the flowers. We may be gray-headed like dandelions, eager to launch the next generation with the first strong gust of wind, ready to pass our wisdom on in precious gossamer-carried seeds. May our lives bloom like the flowers. Some of us sometimes spring up overnight and fade in the hot glare. May our lives bloom like the flowers. Some of us sometimes are like roses, slowly assembling petal after tightly wrapped petal, and revealing our full glory only after everything is in place. May our lives bloom like the flowers. Sometimes we are roadside weeds, loveliness bursting improbably from the dust and debris. May our lives bloom like the flowers. May we offer our beauty with the simplicity of flowers, expecting no recognition, hoping for nothing, giving out of what we are, and knowing it is enough. May our lives bloom like the flowers. Amen.
Find the stillness, hold the stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
This is the time in our service when we lift up the generosity of all of you, members and friends and visitors. Your pledges and gifts help keep our doors open and our programs vibrant. So, thank you very much.
It is time for us to share in the flower communion. I ask that as you each in turn approach the communion vases, you do so quietly, reverently, with a sense of how important it is for each of us to address our world and one another with gentleness, justice, and love. I ask that you select a flower different from the one you brought that particularly appeals to you. So take a second to fall in love. As you take your flower, note its particular shape and beauty and presence. So now let us share quietly in this Unitarian Universalist ritual of oneness and love. The communion is shared silently. Oh, they're going to line up too. Would you like a flower brought to you?
No, thank you. But I appreciate it. I won't be going home. So I don't want it to die in my car.
Let us sing our last hymn, closing hymn. Number 863, Spring has now unwrapped the flowers. Number 63.
meekly among the hills, set the meadows dancing.
Now hear my benediction. We have ended the service, the last service of this in this beloved meeting house until we meet again in September. Let us go out into the world doing songs, living songs, songs that turn ashes into garlands, songs that bind up the afflicted and those who mourn, songs that, like oaks, have roots that go deep and strong. Let us go out into the world singing. We know these songs. We have sung them in this meeting house. They are songs that give us life. They are songs that give us meaning. Let us go now, singing for peace and justice. And may the world join us in celebration and in love. Go in peace. Amen.